Star Trek, Section 31. This will be a full spoiler review. I have a review up on my blog, soundarbettermyhead.com. I don't think there's any spoilers in there. I really don't do a lot of, really don't really do hardly any reviews for streaming movies. They're streaming movies. They're not, it's like a weird level somewhere between a TV show and a movie. I'm doing this because I'm a big Star Trek fan. I feel like I'd like to talk about some Star Trek stuff. I end up giving this movie a 1.5 out of 5. It's not any good. Originally, this was meant to be a streaming series. It was supposed to roll out of Star Trek Discovery. COVID kind of derailed production on it, and it got bounced around for a while, and I guess apparently Michelle Yeoh, who stars in it, really still wanted to do this. So she was constantly pushing behind the scenes to make sure it still happened. I think after she won her Academy Award, they knew she was going to be probably more likely to be busy going forward. So they had decided to make it a movie instead. And it was what they hoped to be the first of many streaming movies on Paramount Plus, which, featuring Star Trek, which is cool. But man, they fell flat here. From what I read, there was 7 different versions of this, going back to when it was a TV series. They rewrote the show, they rewrote the pilot, they rewrote it as a movie, and I don't know, it definitely feels like a TV series, like the pilot kind of mixed in with some of the intermediate episodes and kind of the finale. It just feels like a very rushed TV series. The very, very basic version of the plot is fine, for a movie. You basically got JoJo's character is recruited by Section 31. Those basically ends up being that there's this kind of a doomsday device, MacGuffin, that they got to stop. Fine, that's pretty basic. I mean, we've seen this in a million movies, TV shows, whatever. The plot itself is not that bad, but just the execution, the pacing is, oh my god. Just the whole show, the whole movie tries to be this kind of quirky, kind of fun, the first Suicide Squad movie, kind of like some of the Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of wacky characters and fun graphics and just the way it's shot and we're having fun. It doesn't really work. It doesn't land. It comes at you just too fast. It's boom, boom, boom. There's these characters. Everybody's over the top. And then they said you're introduced to it, and then the problem is this thing was promoted so heavily. As soon as the film starts, okay, that's JoJo, that's Seth, that's this character. And they're trying to make it seem like that you shouldn't know who they are yet because they're going to introduce them all in a couple of minutes. But it's okay, we already know who everybody is. This feels like a waste of time. I know it's not a waste of time for the characters because they got to learn who's who, but just it doesn't work the way they shot it. Just even this feels like small potatoes. Hey, we need your help. This guy's trying to sell us some kind of weapon, and we want you to help stop him. And then they give their version of what they would have did, which is silly. And then we get the action version of what they do, which is fine because it works. But basically, this guy's bringing this little briefcase thing in, and they got to get it from him. And it's not that hard. They literally could have just jumped the guy as soon as he got into the station and took the thing and been done with it. It wasn't biologically attached to his hand. He wasn't the greatest fighter in the world. There was no reason given why you couldn't just sucker punch this guy as soon as he got there and take this thing. It had to be this big elaborate thing where you got him alone, and it's what the hell is any of this? Just made it more difficult than it needed to be. And then we got the main bad guy shows up, who it just felt like a henchman. It's okay, this is the henchman of probably the bad guy. He's gonna steal this thing and pick it back to the main bad guy. And you immediately figure out, because earlier in the film, which is a true intro, we get the flashback of JoJo as a child or a teenager, which I'm about to come back to in about 2 seconds here because it's kind of grating. But you immediately know that it's her friend / lover, or whatever you want to call him, showing up to take the thing. There's no surprise whatsoever that's who it's going to be. As soon as you see him, yeah, that's who it's going to be. And they got this whole thing where they got these little devices, a little phase, and it's weird that somehow he has one too. Like, what are odds that she happened to be using this device, that he happened to have it too? And that's a nitpick, whatever. And like, you gotta break logic, because the thing, you phase through people, you phase through walls, but you could walk on the floor. I wish they would have done like some kind of explanation, like how they could stand on the floor and they're not falling through it. As you know, I know Star Trek's done stuff before where like people can phase and they can walk on the floor. It's just a common conceit that that's how it works. But in one point, Georgia's foot gets stuck in a wall and the thing's like fritzing. It's like, seemed like the wall should have like merged with her foot. Like, there was a Next Generation where somebody kind of fell through the floor and stopped and they died because their body became one over the floor. And it's just like, oh, whatever, my foot's kind of temporarily stuck in a wall. Again, a little bit of a nitpick, but it's like, it's a trope that this, like, they're trying to, I think the audiences are going to ignore it because we've seen it before, but sometimes you got to demand better. Going back to the start of this movie, we don't know a lot of how the Terran Empire operates. Like, it's implied at one point that the mirror Hoshi from Enterprise took the Defiant and she took control of the Empire, became the new Emperor. You know, things seem to work here about, like, if you don't like the old Emperor, you kill them and take their place. Like, or I don't know, maybe there's like birthright thing, like you're born into like a royal family. Like, it's never really explained, but I never got the impression that they basically had a Hunger Games where they took a bunch of kids and they all had to fight each other, and then the winners got to go home and murder their families, and whoever did it gets to be the new Emperor. Like, that's doesn't seem like anything we've ever heard about the Terran Empire. I mean, yeah, it's like a sign of survival of the fittest kind of a thing, which sort of goes in their mindset, but they're more about backstabbing to get ahead, not so much like having, like, you know, like I said, the Hunger Games to, you know, work your way to the top. Going back to the main story again, with the team being so over the top, it's just hard to give a shit about any of them. It's like, okay, whatever. You know, when things finally calm down, you get to, at least once you get to talk to Alak, like, you get his backstory, and the actor sells it, and you finally start to like feel something for these characters. But you know, then immediately, you know, you lost Mel like early on, who might have been interesting, but you know, they kill her early on. Then you lose Zeph not out long after that. They try to be clever with the whole mole thing. I wish they would have played up the paranoia a little bit, like, who's the mole? Like, is this kind of like, okay, one of us is a mole, whatever, just keep an eye on each other. I like the concept of how they try to trick you to think someone else was the mole, but it's super obvious. Like, I figured out pretty quickly, and then it takes Giorgio and the rest of the people way longer than it should have. Like, they see video of Zeph punching himself to death, yelling, you know, basically, don't do this to me, don't do this to our friends, and they're like, oh, he killed himself. Like, obviously he's not doing it. I mean, whether you want to assume the guy's invisible or not makes a different wild accusation, that's one thing, but you're like, oh, he didn't seem happy that he was killing himself. And there's a million plot holes in this whole sequence here. I didn't want to get to all of them because there's just too many. Then we have this, and this is a planet itself. Look, that's another thing. It looked like a TV series pretending like it had a movie budget and just failing. Like, none of the sets looked that cool. They just looked like Discovery kind of era sets. You know, the ships looked okay for the little bit that we saw ships. There was this big fight scene that I was about to get to where they're on this moving platform. It just looked fake as hell. It's just blurry. The planet looks silly. They've got these random exploding fireballs. It's like, okay, I guess it's supposed to look cool. It didn't. It's just like, oh, look, there's random fireballs that shoot out of this planet. I think it was supposed to be some kind of facility, but I guess it's still, I don't know. I don't even want to get into like the logistics or what the hell that was all about. The fight scenes themselves, again, that was one of the big fight scenes on these moving platforms. It just, you couldn't tell what was going on. Everything was blurry. It just was uninteresting. It wasn't shot that well. The fight with Giorgio in the beginning, it was okay at times. Even then, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. It just didn't work for some reason. Just the presentation of it. Being able to phase through stuff wasn't as cool of a concept as it could have been. It didn't really result in anything really that much cooler in the fight scene. Just meant that like the other characters really couldn't get involved. Never really gave a really good reason to why Fuzz was the mole. What he hoped to gain out of it. Even what, you know, the main bad guy's goal was just so kind of vague. Like what? How's this supposed to work? Like, yeah, and the device, like, it could destroy a quadrant. Like, it was so, again, vague, like what it could do. I mean, I know that's what most MacGuffins are, but just like, what are you exactly trying to stop? It's just like, and it felt like rushed. It just kind of felt like again, it felt like he should have been the middleman, not the main boss. Like, oh, he's gonna get this with like the main boss. Like, no, he's like the main bad guy. And then the whole ending was sold on the relationship between him and Giorgio, which was only briefly established in like a couple quick clips at the start of the episode. It's like and she acts her ass off in the scene where she has to kill him, and it's like she sells a tragedy, but you don't feel any emotion towards it. You don't feel shit about this guy. It's just felt shoehorned in. It's like, I don't know. I think as a series, yeah, you could have dragged this out to the finale and it would have meant something. But in the movie, it's just like, oh, who cares? And again, without the guy having any real motivation, and they're both kind of flip-flopping, like, oh, I can't be with you because you're nobody, but I still love you, but I'm your emperor. And like, it's just too all over the place. And they would at least sold that. They made it like she won and he was in second place, so he basically had to be her slave. And treat him like shit, I guess. I don't know. It would work better if, like, we found out she still was in love with him as an adult, and they still had this relationship because she's a emperor. She could do what she wants, and maybe he turned on her because of this device. Like, I don't know. There was an opportunity that they could have put some kind of human connection back into their story, and they didn't. And then just the end is like, and then Rachel Garrett's in it for like really no reason. It's cool that we get some backstory on this, Enterprise sea captain, because she only had one other appearance, but it doesn't really add that much to her, and she just kind of feels out of place, and you get weird like lines of dialogue, and then this end kind of wraps up like this weird happy ending, like let's go on more adventures, basically. Like, what? I've heard, and then the whole thing, like, why she even joined Section 131 is kind of like, well, you don't really want to be pretending bar the rest of your life. I wish there was more to, like, her using Section 31 to, like, redeem herself for all the shit she did as, the Emperor. Like, it just didn't feel like that. It's kind of like, oh, you just get back in action. And like I said, it would have made more sense if this Section 31 was there, and they were on the space station to stop this thing, and she happened to be there, too, because it was her space station. And then they kind of crossed paths, and then the guy got away with the device, and then she realized what it was, and now she's invested. Like, this is part of her legacy as an emperor that she didn't like, and it just don't sell. That's kind of there, but they don't sell that part of it very well. And another thing is, and I don't think this is really the part of the show necessarily, is it takes place in what they call the Lost Era. It's this portion of time basically between the end of all the original Star Trek stuff and the Next Generation stuff, and it's something that we haven't seen much of, and people knew once they said Rachel Garrett, they knew that's where this was going to take place, so everyone was like excited to see this little slice of the Star Trek universe we haven't really explored very well, and they don't at all. Like, you don't see Starfleet, you don't see like really anything that should be happening in this era that would be like, I think in this time, like Uhura and I think even Sulu both have starships that they're commanding. I mean, obviously you're not going to get either of those actors, but even though a mention would be cool. I think around this time, I think the Enterprise B is still in service, which we've only seen in Generations. There's a mention like, hey, Enterprise can't make it, or something then to kind of tie into like this cool, unexplored era. But it's like this show could have taken place basically any place, anytime. It could have happened same time period as like Discovery in the Far Future. It could have been like anywhere. It's just such a generic, time frame, and like so far out of the Federation. And I say again, outside of Rachel Garrett, there's nothing to really tie this to like any particular point in Star Trek history. And then even with that, it barely feels like Star Trek. It doesn't feel like they're trying to sell Giorgio on, the good that Starfleet does and the good that the Federation does. It's like, it's just Starfleet's got nothing to really do with the story, barely. And like Section 31, they're so poorly defined here. It's like, we know eventually they're going to be like, we know they start off like nobody knows about them. Then everybody knows about them, and they're an essential part of Starfleet. And then we know eventually nobody knows about them again. Like here, it's like apparently they are, people kind of know them. It's like they got different like teams you could send out to do missions that, are a little more risky for Starfleet, and they don't want to like get their hands dirty. But I don't know. It's just they're kind of poorly defined what they are. They've always been such a wild card in the Star Trek universe because they're basically doing like dirty shit that Starfleet wouldn't do and normally wouldn't approve of, because they kind of fly under the radar, because most people don't know they exist. So I don't know. I got pretty long-winded on this. Just as I said, there was a tiny little potential there. There's like, okay, I could see If you told me the story and some of the general specifics of it, like, okay, I could see this being interesting. I could definitely see this being a good TV series. But everything's so poorly executed that nothing works, and it just completely falls flat, and it probably ruins, like, not only any kind of a sequel going forward, which I know Michelle Yeoh would love to do, but also, like, probably any other Star Trek, I don't know what the budget on this was, but any other Star Trek, TV movies, which is a great time for them. They don't got enough time or money to do a whole series, and they got a decent concept. You could do it like this, but we might never see that because of this. I could probably go on forever about this. I'm a pretty big Trekkie, and I'm trying not to get too much into the Trek lore. Just the movie itself just really wasn't any good on any level. Even as a Trek fan, I can't imagine anybody really getting into this. Like I said, I got the spoiler-free versions review up, along with some other movie reviews and some TV reviews. I got my comics that I do. I got those all at soundedbettermyhead.com, so if you want to check any of that stuff out, that'd be awesome. On that, thanks for watching.